The ballroom sparkled with golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, sending reflections across the polished floors. Tables were dressed in fine white linen, glinting silverware and sparkling glassware lined up neatly. Guests arrived in elegant gowns and tailored suits, their laughter and conversations filling the space with a lively hum. Waiters and waitresses moved quickly, carrying trays of drinks and delicate appetizers, weaving between clusters of people. Among them, a young waitress moved gracefully, balancing a tray of champagne with practiced ease. She smiled politely at each guest she passed, her movements smooth and quiet, blending into the background of the busy event. She had worked in the hotel for a few years now. Every evening was similar. Long hours, lots of people, careful attention to detail. She knew the layout of the ballroom like the back of her hand and could navigate the crowded space without bumping into anyone. Her colleagues often joked about how she seemed to glide rather than walk. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the energy of the event, the glittering guests, or perhaps something in her own heart that made her feel alive in a way she rarely did. There was a nervous excitement bubbling inside her, one she couldn't quite name. Most of the guests paid her no attention beyond a polite nod or smile. Some barely noticed her at all, engrossed in conversations about business, fashion, or the latest gossip. And that was fine. She liked being in the background. It gave her time to observe, to learn, and to dream. From the corner of the ballroom, she watched a group laughing heartily, clinking their glasses together. Their world seemed so distant from hers, filled with glamour and privilege she had only ever glimpsed, and yet she felt no envy. She was happy doing what she loved, even if it seemed ordinary to the people around her. As she served drinks, she caught herself glancing at the grand piano at the far end of the room. It gleamed under the chandelier light, its polished black surface reflecting the opulence of the event. A small sign next to it indicated that a performance was scheduled. Her fingers itched, a subtle reminder of her secret life. Music had been a part of her since she could remember. She had spent countless hours at a small piano at home, learning, practicing, losing herself in melodies that no one else heard. Her family had never discouraged it, but they had never thought it could take her anywhere. So she kept it to herself, a quiet passion tucked into the folds of her ordinary life. Tonight, as she carried a tray of glasses through the crowd, she felt a pang of longing. She imagined sitting at that piano, letting her fingers move freely, creating music that could fill the room, touch hearts, and make people stop in their tracks. She smiled at the thought, quickly returning her attention to her work. It was not her place to perform here. She reminded herself of that, taking another order from a guest and carefully pouring champagne into delicate flutes. Her life was simple, structured, predictable. That was comfortable in its own way. But the music, the thought of it, stirred something deep inside her, something she had almost forgotten. The event was in full swing now. Waitresses darted between tables, delivering food and drinks, while servers in black suits moved with precision, attending to guests' needs. The chatter of the crowd created a warm, buzzing atmosphere, the kind that made the room feel alive. She paused for a moment, letting herself take it all in. The sparkle of the chandeliers, the soft laughter, the smell of fine perfume mixed with the scent of freshly cooked food. She could see the pride on the hotel manager's face as he watched the event unfold perfectly, everything running smoothly. And she felt a quiet pride too, in her own role in making it all happen. Even as she worked, her mind wandered to the piano. She remembered the first time she had learned to play a simple melody, sitting on a small bench at home, feeling the keys under her fingers, and realizing that music could express what words never could. Over the years, she had grown more confident, tackling more complex pieces, learning to convey emotion through each note. She had performed in front of her family a few times, receiving gentle applause, but she had never played for strangers, never for a crowd like this one. The thought made her heart race, a mixture of fear and excitement twisting together. She had always believed that one day, if the opportunity arose, she would let the music speak for itself. As she moved toward a table where a group of guests had requested more drinks, she overheard snippets of conversation about the upcoming piano performance. One guest mentioned how a famous pianist was supposed to play tonight, someone renowned for talent and grace, someone the audience would remember long after the evening ended. She smiled politely, serving the drinks, but the mention of the pianist stirred something else inside her. She wondered what it would feel like to be the one seated at the grand piano, commanding the room with music. drawing people into a world she had known so intimately for years. Time passed, and the scheduled performance approached. The crowd began to gather near the piano, murmuring with anticipation. She noticed a subtle commotion near the stage. A few staff members whispered hurriedly, and a look of concern crossed the event coordinator's face. Curiosity pulled her closer, even as she carried a tray filled with appetizers. The pianist had not yet arrived. The coordinator's eyes darted around, clearly worried. The guests were becoming restless, wondering what was happening. It was an unusual situation, and tension began to ripple through the room. She felt a strange thrill watching the flurry of activity. Something about the uncertainty made her pulse quicken. She had never imagined being a part of the performance herself, but now, with the scheduled pianist missing, a thought flitted through her mind, a fleeting, daring idea. She paused near the edge of the gathering crowd, just out of sight, listening to the coordinator's whispers. The staff seemed uncertain, hesitant to ask anyone else to step in. And yet the piano sat there, empty, its polished surface reflecting the chandeliers like a silent invitation. She continued serving for a few more moments, her mind racing. Every instinct told her to stay in her role, to remain the quiet, invisible waitress who moved gracefully among the guests. But another voice, softer but persistent, urged her to consider what she had always loved, the music that had shaped her life. She imagined sitting at the piano, the keys cool under her fingertips, the first note echoing through the grand hall. The crowd would stop, and for a brief moment the world would shrink to the space between each note. Her heart beat faster at the thought, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The coordinator approached her, eyes scanning the room anxiously. Something about her posture, her calm presence in the midst of chaos, must have caught his attention. He spoke quietly, asking if she could do anything to help. She felt her mouth go dry. She could almost hear her own heartbeat over the buzz of conversation. Without fully realizing it, the words slipped out. She could play the piano. The coordinator's eyes widened, searching her face for certainty. She nodded, barely daring to breathe, and he hesitated, then gestured toward the empty piano. There was no time for rehearsal, no chance to test the waters. It was now or never. She carried the tray to the side, setting it down carefully, and walked toward the piano. Her legs felt unsteady, but her mind cleared as she approached the keys. Guests turned to see who would step forward, and she felt a sudden awareness of every eye on her. Her pulse thudded in her chest, but she took a deep breath, settling onto the bench. The polished wood beneath her seemed solid, grounding her, as if urging her to trust in what she knew. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, and in that moment, a calm determination replaced her fear. She would play. She would let the music speak. The room hushed, sensing the shift. Waiters paused mid-step. Guests leaned slightly forward, and even the coordinator took a quiet step back. No one knew what to expect, and as she pressed the first note, a soft, clear sound filled the air. It was simple at first, almost shy, but it held a promise, a hint of the beauty to come. She felt the familiar joy of creating, of letting her hands express what her heart had carried for so long. And in that moment, the young waitress, unnoticed for years in her quiet service, began to step into a world where music would make everyone stop, listen and wonder. The first note lingered in the air, a gentle sound that seemed to ripple through the room. For a moment everyone froze, unsure of what was happening. The young waitress, now sitting at the grand piano, felt her fingers tremble slightly as they hovered above the keys. She took a deep breath and let her hands fall naturally into place, letting muscle memory take over. Years of practice had led her to this moment, and suddenly, fear began to melt away, replaced by a quiet confidence. The first few chords were soft, tentative, but they carried a warmth that drew the attention of the entire room. Guests paused their conversations, and even the bustling waiters slowed their steps. Some whispered to each other, wondering if this was planned, while others simply leaned forward, captivated by the unexpected performance. The young waitress closed her eyes briefly, letting the music guide her. Each note was a story, a reflection of countless hours she had spent at home, practicing alone, dreaming of this exact moment. She didn't think about the audience, the luxury, or the prestige around her. She only thought about the music and the joy it brought her. The room transformed as her confidence grew. What had started as tentative notes became fluid, flowing melodies that filled the grand hall with emotion. Her fingers danced over the keys, moving with grace and precision. There was an undeniable connection between her and the piano, a conversation without words. The guests, many of whom had come expecting background entertainment, were now fully immersed in the performance. Some faces showed astonishment, others admiration, and a few guests seemed genuinely moved, their eyes misting as the music carried them into a different world. A small cluster of guests near the front whispered among themselves, surprised by the skill and emotion being displayed. They exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that this was no ordinary performance. The elegance of the hotel, the sparkling chandeliers and the clinking of glasses faded into the background. All that remained was the piano, the music, and the young woman whose talent had remained hidden for so long. Her fingers glided effortlessly, weaving through delicate passages, bold chords, and soft, lingering notes. Each moment brought a new wave of sound, carrying the audience further into her world. Behind the scenes, the event coordinator watched with wide eyes, unable to believe what was unfolding. He had been frantic moments before, worried that the absence of the scheduled pianist would ruin the evening. Now he was witnessing something extraordinary. Staff members peeked from behind doors and around corners, watching silently, unsure whether they should interrupt or simply let the music continue. It was clear that something remarkable was happening. The young waitress, who had been so ordinary just moments ago, had become the center of attention without even trying. The performance was not just about technical skill, it was about emotion. She played pieces that carried joy, melancholy, hope, and a quiet strength. Each section of the music told a story, a reflection of her own journey, long hours of practice, self-doubt, and perseverance. The guests could feel it in the way the notes lingered in the air, in the subtle shifts of tempo, in the delicate pauses that allowed the music to breathe. Some guests leaned closer to the piano, as if proximity could allow them to absorb even more of the feeling behind each chord. As she continued, she became aware of the crowd's growing attention. The soft murmurs had died down, replaced by an almost tangible silence punctuated only by the music. Some guests had stopped mid-sip, their champagne glasses raised in frozen hands. Others rested their elbows on the table, chins in hands, eyes fixed on the young woman who was turning an ordinary event into something unforgettable. She felt the energy of the room, the connection to each person listening, but she did not let it distract her. Instead, it fueled her performance, pushing her to give more, to pour herself into every note. There was a moment when a particularly challenging section came, one that she had practiced countless times but never played under pressure. Her fingers flew over the keys, precise and confident, each chord striking with clarity. The audience held their collective breath, sensing the intensity of the music. When the section resolved into a softer, flowing passage, a wave of relief and awe seemed to ripple through the room. It was as if everyone, guests and staff alike, recognized the depth of her talent and the courage it took to step forward. The young waitress felt a quiet smile on her face. She was sharing something deeply personal, and the response from the audience was more than she had ever hoped for. The grand piano itself seemed to come alive under her touch, resonating with a richness that filled every corner of the hall. Even the chandeliers appeared to shimmer more brightly, as though reflecting the magic of the performance. Guests who had initially doubted or perhaps barely noticed her presence before now leaned forward in complete attention. Some whispered, their voices filled with wonder. Others simply let the music wash over them, unable to find words to describe what they were hearing. It was a rare shared moment of beauty that transcended social status, background, and expectation. Time seemed to stretch and bend around her performance. Minutes passed, but it felt like the music had suspended the evening, allowing everyone to exist in that space together. Each note told a story, each chord carried emotion. Her life as a waitress, her quiet hours of practice at home, all seemed to converge in this moment. The crowd sensed it too. There was a palpable connection, an invisible thread linking the young woman and every person in the room. It was more than just a performance. It was a shared experience, an unexpected gift that would linger in the minds of those present for a long time. As she neared the conclusion of her first piece, she allowed herself a brief glance at the audience. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, some nodding in quiet admiration, others smiling with genuine pleasure. Even the hotel staff, usually busy with tasks and unnoticed, paused to watch, caught up in the extraordinary scene. She felt a surge of emotion herself, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. The music had carried her far beyond the ordinary roles she had always known. She had stepped into a new space, one that acknowledged her talent, her dedication, and her courage. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence, a collective intake of breath, as if the room itself were processing the magic it had just witnessed. Then slowly applause began. A single clap at first, then another, until it swelled into a full, enthusiastic ovation. Guests rose from their seats, some standing, some clapping their hands over their hearts. The young waitress remained at the piano for a heartbeat longer, letting the sound of applause wash over her. It was overwhelming, but in a good way, a validation of years of effort and the courage to seize an unexpected opportunity. The coordinator approached, his face a mixture of astonishment and relief. He muttered a few words of praise, almost unable to articulate how impressed he was. Staff members whispered to each other, their own surprise evident. Conversations that had paused out of curiosity now buzzed with excitement. People sharing their amazement, recounting moments of the performance that had moved them most. Social media posts and messages were already being shared, capturing the unexpected story of the waitress who had transformed the evening. For the young woman, it was a moment of quiet triumph. She had stepped out of her ordinary life and into a space where her hidden talent shone brightly. Her hands rested on the keys, still warm from the music as she soaked in the applause. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, the kind that only comes after giving your heart fully to something you love. In that moment, she realized that life could surprise her just as much as she could surprise it. A single decision, a single act of courage, had created a memory that would linger far beyond the night. As the guests slowly returned to their conversations, still buzzing with energy, she stood, bowing slightly, a humble acknowledgement of their appreciation. The piano remained silent now, but carrying the echoes of her performance in its polished frame. She returned to her duties, but something had changed. The world felt larger, possibilities brighter, and the line between ordinary and extraordinary blurred. She moved through the room with renewed purpose, knowing that her music had touched lives in ways words never could, and that she had finally stepped into a space where her gift was recognized, even if only for a few precious moments. The applause began to fade, but the energy in the room lingered like a spark refusing to die. The young waitress stepped back from the piano, her hands still tingling from the music. She could feel her heartbeat slowly returning to normal, though her pulse still carried an echo of excitement and adrenaline. Guests whispered in small groups, pointing toward her with smiles and gestures that spoke volumes. She moved quietly back to her duties, carrying trays with careful balance, but each step felt lighter than before, almost as if the performance had lifted her beyond the ordinary weight of her role. As she served guests at a nearby table, she caught fragments of conversations that made her smile. People were talking about her playing, the way her fingers had moved over the keys, the emotion in every note. Some whispered admiration, others simply muttered in disbelief. "Who is she?" one guest asked quietly, leaning toward a friend. Another answered, shaking their head, "I've never seen anyone like that." She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of pride and humility. The music had been hers, yet it had become something shared with everyone in the room. That shared moment, fleeting yet powerful, was something she would carry with her forever. Behind her, staff members exchanged quiet glances. The coordinator, who had been tense and anxious just minutes before, now wore an astonished grin. He muttered to a colleague, barely able to contain his amazement. The young waitress overheard bits of their conversation, their words filled with wonder and admiration. She tried to focus on her tasks, but her mind kept returning to the piano, the notes, the feeling of connection she had felt with the audience. She realized that her world had shifted subtly. Something invisible had changed. Something inside her had opened in a way she had never expected. A few guests had moved closer to the piano, lingering even as the music stopped. They asked staff quietly about the young woman, seeking to learn more about her. The whispers of her talent were spreading rapidly, a ripple that began near the piano and reached every corner of the room. She felt a mixture of embarrassment and quiet pride as she overheard snippets of their admiration. No one had expected this. She herself had not expected this. It was a moment that balanced delicately between surprise and discovery, and she was living it in real time. The music had awakened something within her. Each step she took back to her duties carried a new confidence, a gentle assurance that her life did not need to be ordinary. She had always known she had talent, but now she had seen firsthand how it could touch others. The realization was both thrilling and humbling. She continued serving, but with a subtle awareness that every movement, every gesture could now carry the weight of recognition. Guests began to notice her more, offering polite smiles and nods that seemed warmer, more personal than before. It was as if the music had transformed not just the room, but the way she moved through it. The event itself continued, but there was a new energy in the air. Conversations flowed differently, as if everyone had been touched by the unexpected performance. Laughter and chatter still filled the room, but under it was a quiet admiration, a recognition of the young woman who had captivated everyone without a word beyond the music. She served dishes with a steady hand, yet her mind often drifted back to the piano. She could still feel the echo of her fingers on the keys, the vibration of the notes, the way the room had held its breath. It was a sensation that would linger long after the evening ended. A few minutes later, a guest approached her cautiously, holding a glass of wine. "Excuse me," they said softly, "but may I ask, do you play often?" She blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. She smiled, a small shy gesture, and nodded. "I practice at home," she said simply. The guest's eyes widened. This was incredible. "I never expected such talent," they whispered almost reverently. The compliment was genuine, not the polite flattery one might hear at events. She thanked them quietly, feeling a warmth that was different from anything she had experienced before. The acknowledgement, simple as it was, made her heart swell. Word of her performance began to circulate quickly. Some guests approached staff, asking if the young woman could play another piece. The coordinator, now realizing the potential, exchanged a look with other staff members, silently agreeing to give her the opportunity. She was unaware of the plans being made, focused instead on returning to her role, but a quiet anticipation began to build in her chest. The idea of playing again, of sharing more of herself, was both thrilling and terrifying. She had stepped into the spotlight once, and now the possibility of continuing beckoned her forward. She took a moment near the piano, fingers brushing lightly over the keys, feeling the familiar comfort of the instrument. It had become a friend, a companion, a voice she had always known but never shared in such a grand space. She closed her eyes briefly, imagining the melodies she could create, the stories she could tell. The thought of performing again sent a shiver of excitement through her. She knew the challenge would be greater, the expectations higher, but she also knew she was ready. The music was not just skill, it was a part of her, and she was no longer afraid to let it speak. Guests had begun to gather near the piano again, sensing something might happen. The air was charged with anticipation, a mixture of curiosity and excitement. Some whispered, wondering if she would play another piece. Others simply watched, eyes wide, captivated by the earlier performance and eager for more. The young waitress felt a gentle pressure, not from fear but from the weight of possibility. She could create something extraordinary again, and for the first time she felt a deep trust in herself. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between her world and theirs. When she sat down at the bench once more, the crowd fell silent. The hush was different this time, anticipatory, filled with expectation. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the coolness and the smooth surface beneath her touch. A deep breath, and then the first notes flowed, soft and tentative, gradually growing in confidence. The music began to tell another story, a continuation of the one she had started earlier, carrying the audience further into a world of emotion, beauty, and subtle complexity. She let herself be carried by the melodies, trusting in her instincts and the lessons of years spent practicing in quiet solitude. The performance deepened with each measure. Her fingers moved with grace, each chord deliberate and expressive. Guests were spellbound, leaning forward, captivated by the skill and emotion she brought to every note. Even the staff, who had seen her countless times as a humble waitress, were struck by the transformation before them. There was something magnetic in the way she played, a combination of technical precision and heartfelt expression that made the music feel alive. She could see subtle smiles, tears glinting in the corners of some eyes, and the slight nods of heads in quiet appreciation. It was as if the music had become a language everyone understood without needing words. As the piece continued, She allowed herself to experiment slightly, adding nuances and variations she had never tried in front of an audience. The piano responded to her touch, resonating with a depth that filled the room. Each note carried intention and feeling, and the audience responded with rapt attention. The young waitress felt a sense of freedom, of release, as though every worry and constraint had melted away. This was her world now, a world where her talent could shine without limits, where her music could speak directly to the hearts of those listening. Time seemed to stretch, each moment infused with significance. The performance became more than just music. It was a statement, a revelation, a celebration of hidden potential. Guests were silent, yet fully present, as though aware that they were witnessing something rare and precious. The young woman, lost in the music, felt a deep connection not just to the piano but to everyone in the room. There was a shared energy, a silent acknowledgement that extraordinary moments could arise from the most ordinary circumstances. It was both humbling and exhilarating, a testament to courage, talent, and the unexpected magic of life. As she approached the conclusion of the piece, she allowed the final chords to linger, letting the resonance fill the room completely before fading. The silence that followed was profound, a quiet space that allowed everyone to absorb the experience. Then slowly applause began, hesitant at first, then swelling into enthusiastic claps and cheers. Guests rose from their seats, some moving closer to offer words of praise, others simply clapping with admiration. The young waitress, sitting at the piano, felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond recognition. It was a feeling of connection, of having touched lives in a way she had only dreamed of. The coordinator approached once more, his face alight with amazement. He murmured words of praise and gratitude, gesturing for staff to ensure she was properly acknowledged. Guests continued to comment among themselves, sharing their astonishment and admiration. Social media posts were already capturing the unexpected story, spreading it further beyond the ballroom. The young woman, though exhausted, felt a profound satisfaction. She had taken a risk, stepped forward, and shared her gift, and the result had been transformative, not just for her, but for everyone who had listened. Returning to her duties after the applause, she moved with a new sense of purpose and pride. Her movements were calm, confident, and deliberate, carrying the quiet power of someone who had experienced a moment of revelation. The piano stood in the corner, silent but alive with the echoes of her music. She knew that this was not the end, but rather the beginning of something greater. The recognition she had received was meaningful, but the deeper reward was the realization that her talent, her courage, and her dedication could create magic, inspire wonder, and leave a lasting impact on the world around her. The applause had barely settled when a noticeable shift began to sweep through the crowd. It was subtle at first, a few heads turning toward the young waitress, whispers spreading like fire. Guests who had been focused on conversations or drinks suddenly found themselves drawn back to the piano, eyes widening in astonishment. The performance had left an impression deeper than anyone could have predicted, a mix of skill, emotion, and courage that seemed almost impossible for someone who had only moments ago been serving trays and smiling politely. The transformation was remarkable, and the guests could not hide their fascination. Groups of people began moving closer, eager to witness more of her talent. The whispers turned into soft conversations, questions asked quietly to staff about who she was, where she had learned to play, and why no one had ever noticed before. There was a palpable sense of wonder in the room. Everyone seemed to be sharing the same thought. How could someone so ordinary, so hidden in plain sight, possess such extraordinary ability? The young waitress moved among the tables with quiet grace, carrying drinks and hors d'oeuvres, yet she felt every gaze upon her, every whisper carried in her direction. She was both humbled and energized by the recognition. The staff, usually invisible in the background, watched in awe. Some had seen her practice in quiet corners of the hotel, but never had they imagined she could captivate an entire audience with such skill. The coordinator, who had been tense and worried just minutes earlier, now wore a look of pure admiration. He quickly conferred with colleagues, gesturing toward her and whispering excitedly about the unexpected opportunity that had arisen. It was clear to everyone that something remarkable had occurred, something beyond the ordinary expectations of a luxury event. Guests who had initially been skeptical or disinterested now leaned closer to the piano, trying to catch the smallest detail of the young woman's expression, the delicate movement of her fingers. Some whispered to each other, amazed at the courage it must have taken to step forward in such a grand setting. Others were silent, simply absorbing the beauty and precision of her playing. It was as if time itself had slowed, allowing everyone to be fully present in the moment, appreciating the magic that had appeared out of nowhere. One of the guests, a woman in a flowing gown, whispered to her companion, "She's incredible." "I can't believe it." The companion nodded, eyes still fixed on the young woman at the piano. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured. "It's more than talent, it's emotion. You can feel it in every note." The young waitress overheard this as she passed by, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. She had never thought of her music in this way, not in a room full of strangers, not in a space where status and appearance usually mattered most. Yet here, in this moment, the music had created a bridge, connecting hearts across differences, touching people on a deeply human level. As she continued to serve, she felt the lingering energy of the performance. Each step, each movement carried a new confidence. She had discovered that her music could captivate, inspire, and move people in ways words never could. Guests were now watching her not just out of curiosity, but with a genuine desire to witness her presence. Some approached staff, asking if she could perform another piece, and the coordinator, realizing the opportunity, nodded and arranged for her to play once more. There was an air of anticipation, an unspoken excitement as people waited to see her return to the piano. When she finally sat at the bench again, the room fell silent. The hush was different this time, filled with expectation and admiration. Guests who had been distracted moments before were now fully attentive, their eyes on her, waiting for the magic to begin again. She placed her fingers lightly on the keys, feeling the familiar coolness beneath her touch, and let the first notes flow. The sound filled the room, soft at first, then gradually building in confidence and emotion. Each chord, each melody carried a story, a reflection of her journey, her dedication, and the quiet strength that had brought her to this moment. The audience responded immediately. Their silence was not empty. It was full of anticipation, wonder, and respect. Some leaned closer to the piano, absorbing every nuance, while others rested back, letting the music wash over them. There were tears in a few eyes, smiles on others, and a sense of shared experience that transcended social status, appearance, and expectation. The young waitress, lost in her music, felt a deep connection to each listener, aware that every note resonated beyond the instrument and into their hearts. As the piece continued, she allowed herself to explore the music more freely, adding subtle variations, soft flourishes, and bold chords that highlighted her skill and emotion. The crowd leaned in, captivated by the unexpected depth and richness of her performance. Some guests whispered, "I've never heard anything like this," while others simply let themselves be carried away, fully present in the beauty unfolding before them. The piano became more than an instrument. It was a conduit for expression, a bridge between the young waitress and the diverse crowd of admirers around her. Staff members watched with a mixture of pride and amazement. They had been part of the evening's events, but this moment was different. They were witnessing the power of hidden talent, the courage to step forward, and the beauty that could emerge when someone embraced their gifts fully. The coordinator, unable to hide his excitement, whispered encouragement, gesturing for the staff to observe and appreciate the extraordinary performance. Even the usual hum of service seemed to pause as everyone became absorbed in the music. Guests began to rise slowly, their initial hesitation giving way to admiration. A few walked closer to offer words of praise, while others clapped quietly, unable to contain their awe. There was a sense of unity, a shared recognition that they were witnessing something remarkable, something that could not be planned or replicated. The young waitress felt the energy of the room, the connection to everyone present, and allowed it to fuel her performance. Each note became more expressive, more confident, more alive. As the music reached its crescendo, the audience was completely captivated. The subtle movements of her hands, the expression on her face, and the emotion in each note combined to create a moment of pure magic. Guests held their breath at the delicate passages, nodded in rhythm with the powerful chords, and leaned forward as the melody carried them along. There was no barrier between performer and audience, only connection, admiration, and shared experience. The young waitress felt a profound sense of fulfillment, realizing that her music had become a gift, not just for herself, but for everyone listening. When the final notes faded, the room was quiet for a heartbeat, as if no one could quite believe what had just happened. Then slowly applause erupted, growing louder and more enthusiastic with each passing second. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and some even calling out words of praise. Staff members, too, joined in, their smiles wide with pride and amazement. The young waitress remained at the piano, letting the sound of the applause wash over her, feeling both humbled and exhilarated. This was a recognition she had never sought but deeply appreciated. The coordinator approached again, his expression a mix of awe and delight. He murmured words of praise and gratitude, ensuring that she was acknowledged properly. Guests continued to share their astonishment, recounting moments of the performance that had touched them most. Social media posts and messages were already circulating, capturing the story of the waitress who had transformed the evening with her talent. She listened quietly, her heart full, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond recognition. It was a validation of years of dedication, practice, and the courage to step forward when the moment demanded it. As she returned to her duties, she moved with a renewed sense of purpose. Her steps were calm, confident, and deliberate, reflecting the quiet strength she had discovered within herself. The piano stood in the corner, silent now, but carrying the echoes of her performance, a reminder of what she had achieved. She realized that her life had shifted, not because of fame or attention, but because she had dared to embrace her talent fully. The recognition was fleeting, but the experience was permanent, a memory she would carry with her always. Guests continued to talk, laugh, and enjoy the event, but the story of the young waitress and her extraordinary performance lingered in every conversation. People shared their amazement, wondering how someone so ordinary could possess such talent, how a single moment could change their perception of what was possible. The energy in the room had transformed, creating a sense of shared wonder that could not be ignored. It was a rare, magical moment, one that would be remembered long after the event ended. For the young woman, the evening had become more than just a job or a performance. It was a revelation of her own potential, a demonstration of the power of courage and dedication. She had stepped into the spotlight, embraced her gift, and created a moment that touched hearts and inspired admiration. As she moved through the crowd, carrying trays and offering smiles, she felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had not only performed but had also connected deeply with those who had witnessed her talent. The room had seen her not just as a waitress, but as an artist, a storyteller, and someone capable of extraordinary things. The room was still buzzing with energy from her performance, a mix of awe, admiration, and disbelief. Guests who had been chatting now found themselves returning to conversations about her, replaying in their minds every delicate note, every powerful chord, and the sheer confidence that had carried her through the performance. The young waitress, though back to her duties, could feel the change in the atmosphere. Her steps seemed lighter, her movements more assured, as if the music had not only transformed the room but had subtly transformed her as well. The world around her felt larger, brighter, and filled with possibility. Staff members whispered among themselves, exchanging looks of pride and astonishment. The coordinator had been moving quickly behind the scenes, ensuring that the performance would be remembered and perhaps even recorded for future reference. The young woman overheard snippets of conversation about how extraordinary it was that someone so humble could display such talent. She felt a quiet sense of validation, but also a new awareness. Her life had shifted. She had stepped out of her ordinary role and into a space where her gift could no longer be overlooked. As she moved through the room, serving drinks and hors d'oeuvres, guests approached her. One person leaning over a table with a kind smile asked quietly, "Have you ever thought of performing professionally?" She blinked, a faint blush coloring her cheeks, and shook her head gently. "I never thought I would get the chance," she replied softly. The guest nodded, understanding more in her expression than in her words. There was respect in their eyes, a recognition of something rare and precious. Others joined, expressing admiration, recounting favorite moments from the performance and asking questions about her musical background. She responded humbly, smiling, but a quiet pride settled in her chest. This was a moment she would remember forever. The coordinator approached her again, a wide smile breaking across his face. He whispered words of praise and explained that he had already received inquiries from event organizers, media, and private parties who wanted to know more about her and her talent. She listened, partly astonished, partly amused at how quickly word had spread. The possibility of performing again, perhaps on a larger stage, had never seemed real before, but now it was tangible. Her music, once confined to the small living room at home, had touched dozens of lives in a grand hotel ballroom, and the impact was undeniable. Guests who had been initially focused on luxury, fashion, and business began to treat her differently. They approached with genuine interest, wanting to know her story, how she had learned to play, and what motivated her. Conversations that had once been polite and superficial now carried warmth, curiosity, and respect. It was a stark reminder that talent and passion could command attention in ways that money, status, or appearance could not. The young waitress felt a deep sense of connection with these people, even as they hailed from worlds so different from her own. Music had bridged that gap effortlessly. Social media posts and photographs began to circulate almost immediately. Guests shared images of her at the piano, applauding and smiling. Comments praising her talent, courage, and humility appeared within minutes. The story of the waitress who had transformed the event with her unexpected performance was spreading rapidly, capturing the imagination of people far beyond the ballroom. Even staff members marveled at how quickly recognition had grown, realizing that sometimes extraordinary moments could emerge from the most ordinary people. As the evening progressed, the young woman returned to the piano one last time. The crowd gathered closer, anticipation evident in every face. She placed her fingers on the keys, feeling the familiar, cool surface beneath her touch. This time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. She was ready to give one final piece, a culmination of the evening's magic. The first notes were soft and delicate, gradually building in intensity and emotion. She allowed herself to lose track of time, to immerse fully in the music, knowing that this was her moment, a rare gift that she had embraced courageously. The audience responded immediately, leaning in, eyes wide with admiration. Every note resonated through the hall, a story of dedication, courage, and the beauty of hidden talent. Guests were captivated, moved, and inspired. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, while others whispered quietly to companions, expressing disbelief and admiration. The young waitress felt a deep connection with each listener, a shared understanding that transcended words. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a bridge between her heart and the hearts of everyone present. As the performance reached its peak, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Each chord was a statement, each melody a reflection of years of practice, perseverance, and quiet determination. The applause that followed was thunderous, louder than before, filled with genuine appreciation and emotion. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and expressing admiration. Staff members joined in, smiling and exchanging glances of amazement. The young waitress, still seated at the piano, let herself absorb the moment fully. It was not about fame, recognition, or reward. It was about the pure joy of sharing her gift and witnessing its impact on others. The evening began to wind down, but the sense of wonder lingered. Guests continued to talk excitedly about the performance, sharing their favorite moments and speculating about the young woman's future. The coordinator spoke quietly with staff, praising her talent and discussing ways to support her potential. Even as she returned to her duties, there was a sense that life had shifted, that possibilities once unimaginable were now within reach. Her music had opened doors not just for recognition, but for personal growth, confidence, and the courage to pursue her dreams. Over the next few days, invitations began to arrive. Event organizers, impressed by her performance, wanted her to play at private functions, charity events, and even larger public gatherings. Local media outlets reached out for interviews, eager to tell her story. Social media continued to buzz with admiration, followers sharing her talent and encouraging others to witness her performances. The young woman, once content with her quiet life as a waitress, began to see a new path unfolding, a life where her passion could be celebrated, shared, and recognized on a larger scale. Despite the attention, she remained humble. She knew that the talent alone was not enough. It was the courage to step forward, the willingness to embrace opportunity, and the dedication to practice tirelessly that had brought her here. She continued to serve at the hotel when needed, blending her work with her growing music career. Each performance became a testament to perseverance, courage, and the power of hidden potential. Guests who returned to the hotel often sought her out, not just for her skill but for the story she represented, a story of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things. Her family, Friends and colleagues celebrated her success with genuine pride. They had always known she possessed talent, but witnessing her performance for a large, discerning audience confirmed what they had always believed: that extraordinary ability often resides in the most unexpected places. She continued to practice, refine her skills, and explore new compositions, driven not by recognition alone, but by the love of music and the joy it brought to her and others. The evening at the luxury event became a turning point, a moment that defined her journey and opened doors to opportunities that had once seemed impossible. As time passed, the story of the young waitress who had amazed a luxury crowd with her piano playing became a source of inspiration. People shared it widely, a reminder that talent, dedication, and courage could break barriers and transform lives. She became an example of how ordinary circumstances could hide extraordinary abilities, and how a single act of bravery, stepping forward and embracing opportunity, could change the course of a life. Her journey continued, filled with music, growth, and connection, proving that extraordinary moments can emerge from the most ordinary beginnings. In reflecting on that night, the young woman realized that the performance had been more than an opportunity to play music. It had been a revelation of her own potential, a celebration of courage, and a bridge to a new chapter in her life. Each note, each melody, and each moment of connection with the audience had affirmed that talent, when shared fearlessly, has the power to inspire, transform, and leave a lasting impact. Her story became a testament to the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary, a reminder that with courage and dedication, anyone can create magic and touch the lives of others in ways they may never have imagined.